Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about making yourself heard and the importance of it. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Fredrik, how can I improve my time to market? Yeah, it's a pretty broad question, but the short answer is you need to find a way for your team and yourself to basically figure out how to reduce waste as much as possible. Let me explain. So for some of you, you may not have faced this sort of problem, but you may at some point hear some of your stakeholders say, oh, we need to reduce waste. Now, what is waste? Well, waste is very simply, in this context, just things that take extra time. You may have heard of I think it's Google's slogan, automate all the things. Well, basically automate anything that is possible to automate. And this is exactly the idea behind that, because automation reduces waste. It reduces the time that you spend on doing things that are just taking up more time than is needed and that is valuable for your project or for your workflow. Now, automation is one way of doing that, but I want to take a slightly different angle on this and talk a little bit about an issue that I've faced myself at work, where I've been trying to make people understand a very critical thing that makes a very, very big difference when it comes to how fast you can go to market. Now, if you work as I do with designers, you will probably know that there very naturally exists a difference of difference of opinion, a difference in will, if you will, between engineers, even if it's front-end engineers, and designers. Now, the difference is usually that a designer is a person with non-technical skills that is promoting what I like to call UX perfection, or perfection, let's call it that. Now, as a designer, the sky is the limit for what you can do. Your desire is to create the best user experience possible in general terms. As an engineer, what your desire is to create, hopefully you have a very similar sort of mindset, you want to create a good product, but your main focus is to create a reliable, stable, and performance system. Why are these two things at odds? Well, I'm very glad that you asked, because depending on the design that you are handed as an engineer and you're going to try to build something, this design and these artboards will determine how complicated the feature becomes. As an example, I had very recently a situation where I talked to my stakeholders and they said, "Why, Fredrik? But like you estimated this story to just take 5 days. Why is it? It's taken 4 weeks now. Why aren't you done?" And I kind of go and I say, "Well, it's very simple, because when you asked me to estimate this, I hadn't seen the designs." And they said, "But how is it possible that something takes so much longer just because the design is different?" So I pulled out the design that they had and compared it to another page that we had made in a fraction of the time and said, well, because the designer wants to have all of these different states and they want it to be possible to collapse these sections, and then these sections needs to remember that, oh, the user has collapsed this, so that the next time they come to the page they should keep that information, and then they have these cards over here that should be shown if the user is this type of user or if this has happened, etc. And I started just listing out all of these tiny little stateful features on what in essence was a form page. Now, I had an agenda with this, and I said, this page here has taken us around now 3 or 4 weeks, and it's still not completely done. And then I point at another page that looks very, very similar, which is in essence just the form. It's a very simple form that has all the information that needs to be uploaded. This page is just a form with some text. It took, and I looked at my coworker and I said, what can it have taken? 10 minutes? An hour tops? Let's say an hour, just to be fair here. And he knows, yeah, that seems reasonable. It should have taken around an hour. And then I compare the two. Which one do you feel is the most visually stunning? Well, of course, it's going to be the very nice page that has taken many, many weeks. But if you compare the cost of developing that page versus the cost of developing this form, you may feel that we have invested way too much in this form as opposed to the value we're going to get back. And the stakeholders, they kind of went crazy and they said, how is it possible? I go, how did this happen? I kind of went, well, because the fundamental problem is when you allow a designer to produce an artboard without any feedback from the engineering department, that's the problem. You see, a designer is not there to create an efficient workflow and try to optimize your time to market, because that is what simplicity would bring. Simplicity is not beautiful. It's all that, well, I'm not going to say that. Sometimes it's actually very beautiful with simple things, but quite a lot of designers are artistic by nature, and being artistic is not something that is going to create, the shortest time to market. So what I told my stakeholders was basically that what you need to think about when you're designing a feature is what we call the MVP mindset. Now that stands for minimum viable product. Why is this important? Well, it's very important because it basically means that the desire for the team and for us is to figure out what is the minimum amount of work we can do in order to ship this feature and have it tested and have it used by our consumers. Because if you focus on doing the minimum thing, then you can create a version 1, ship that in the shortest amount of time possible, and then figure out, is this going to work? Because now we've invested 4 or 5 weeks or something like that into a feature that looks very nice, but nobody's using it. It doesn't produce any money for the company, and hopefully it's going to work, because if it's not what the users want, we have produced what's called waste. We have wasted time building something that was not what the customers wanted, even though it's beautiful. It's the best. I mean, it looks amazing. This is hard. This is very, very, very hard for designers and for stakeholders. And it is something that, as an engineer, I find very often frustrating, because it always falls on us to do this. It always falls on us. What I find, and you kind of have to deal with it, because as I was saying, if you do this, you, at the end of the day, if you ignore it, you're the one who's going to get blamed for it, or you're going to get the question. Because that's kind of funny, because the designer can produce an artboard that is going to put you in a situation where you have to work for weeks in order to make this happen, and then you are the one who gets the question, why are you so slow? And I kind of go, I'm not slow, it's just that you're asking me to build a skyscraper. If you don't understand what it is that you are ordering, then don't ask, because usually they expect that, you're going to tell them, it's going to take 2 days, it's going to take 3 days tops, maybe 5 days if it's a really big story. But if you get an estimate where you basically is something of 2 weeks or more, they're going to start noticing and go, why does it take so long? And this is where I tell you guys, this is where you should really start thinking about reducing waste. It's much better for everybody if you as the developer go and say, well, if we simplify the feature, if we cut some of these things down and we slim down the feature to an MVP, where we ship something that is the smallest thing possible first, and then we evaluate if this is working for us, and if we need to improve it, we improve it, and then we do this in an iterative fashion. You will, number one, make sure that you don't spend a lot of time on something that may not produce all that much value, and number two is that you will simplify the system. The best part about this is that if you have this approach, the designers, sure, they may not always get what they want, and sometimes they never get what they want, if we're being honest here, but at the same time, you're going to find an equilibrium. Instead of giving them exactly what they want, you start on your side. It's kind of like a haggle. It's almost like a haggling for goods. They make an offer, you look at the artboards as an offer, as a suggestion, and then you make a counter offer, and then they make an offer, and you have a communication where you reach a sweet spot, which is usually somewhere in the middle. So what I want you to take away from this is that the quickest way for you, and this is always going to be true, to reduce the time to market, in other words, for you to be able to ship things as quickly as humanly possible, it's always to reduce waste, or to reduce the scope of the of the feature. Because as you know, I have said so many times, the problem is what the problem is. There's no way for you to stop that. And this is why coding skills is not the only thing that matters, people. The most important thing to solve a problem where a feature is actually so big and so complicated is to redefine the scope. If you get a design artboard where they basically outline the entire Facebook homepage or the Facebook news flow, well, that's going to take you a long time to build, and then they will ask you, well, how long is it going to take? And you say, well, with this scope it's going to take this amount of time, and then they go, oh, that's way too long. And then you kind of go, well, the only way to make it easier is we can't cut corners because the feature is this complicated. But if we start slicing away these things and these things and these things, and this is something I think it's frustrating, but it's something that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to go and make counter arguments and say, well, we can simplify this, we can cut away all of this nonsense over here and so forth, and this, and you can always almost see the designers just, you know, they get needles in their heart, and they kind of go, oh, he's destroying my work. And I kind of go, well, I'm sorry, but you're asking me to build something that is impossible to do in the time that I have been given. So either you give me more time, or we have to cut some stuff away. Kill your darlings, or kill your babies, or whatever it's called. I mean, we do have to do it, and so should they. And then you find an equilibrium. It becomes a negotiation, and then you land in something that is feasible to make in the amount of time given, and then you explain, this is an MVP, and if it turns out that we need to invest more time to improve this feature, we will make a version 2. This is usually the way how you can reduce the time to market in the most efficient way possible. Have a great day.